Hey folks, welcome back to another video in my series on sleep disorders and insomnia. If you haven't seen the previous videos, in part 1 we talk about circadian rhythms, napping, and caffeine. In part 2 we talk about setting the environment for a good night's sleep and having a good routine before you fall asleep. In part 3 we talk about racing thoughts. So today we're going to talk about some of the more common sleep disorders such as sleepwalking, sleep talking, nightmares, and sleep paralysis. Stay with me now. All right, folks, so today we're going to talk about some of the more common sleep disorders: the sleepwalking, sleep talking, nightmares, and sleep paralysis. What I'm not going to cover today, but I will put some links down in the description, is some of the other sleep disorders. There's so much to this topic that I could probably do a video a week for a full year and still not cover it. So I'm hitting on some of the major points, and I got some questions on some of my other social media about some of the other ones. So I will put some links down below, probably like WebMD or reliable sources like that. If I ever come back to this series in the future, we'll try to remember to kind of hit back on these ones. But the ones that I'm not going to specifically talk about are narcolepsy, sleep apnea, Restless Leg Syndrome, Perimenopause Insomnia, and PMS Insomnia. I'll put those down in the link, and hopefully at some point down the road we can get back to those. I really would like to get a guest on for those last two topics because I don't have a lot of expertise in there. I know how to research it and get that information to bring it to you, but if one of my therapist friends out there, I know several of my subscribers are therapists, if they have some expertise in this and they're willing to do a collaboration, just hit me up in the comments. We'll set something up. I would love to do that. Okay, so let's talk about one of the more benign ones, probably the most benign of the sleep disorders here. And some people say it's not really even a sleep disorder, but let's cover it. And that is sleep talking. Sleep talking is sometimes also called somniloquy. Sorry if I messed up the pronunciation on that. Sleep talking is actually extremely common, especially in children. Some more serious types of sleep talking can occur during night terrors or nightmares. So what causes sleep talking? Well, it can be stress, it can be illness, certain medications, certainly caffeine intake before bedtime can probably have an impact on these kind of things. Certain physical illnesses, including a fever, can cause this to happen, and certain mental health issues can also exacerbate this. Sleep talking is generally considered pretty benign, so it's not really harmful. Some of the people that sleep in the room with you or sleep in the next room may not be too pleased about it. But if it's not paired with night terrors or nightmares, it's not a big deal. And if it's in children, a lot of times they'll outgrow it. If it is happening with nightmares and night terrors, it may be helpful to go talk to a therapist. For more mild cases, it can be helpful to do some journaling before bed. As we talked about in all the previous videos, you definitely want to be careful about your pre-nighttime rituals. So not watching anything really stressful before bedtime, watch the caffeine intake, try to actually turn off the electronics and getting to a more restful state right before you go to sleep. For adults, watch your caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol intake right before bed. Try to stay with a very consistent sleep schedule. And out of all the things that we're going to talk about today, this is probably one of the most important things. It's also when people come to me for therapy and we have some sleep issues going on, this is a lot of times this is one of the issues that I have the most resistance from patients about, that, if you're staying up till 2 a.m. Netflixing or watching Netflixing or playing video games or even reading your favorite book and then you're sleeping till 1 o'clock. Well, for most neurotypical people, that's not hardwired for you. That's actually very bad for you. So we got to get those circadian rhythms back on track. Yes, I know there's people who are night owls, right? I get that. All I can do here is hit the major talking points. This is, so I'm speaking to people that are neurotypical, and you really can benefit from getting on a normal quote unquote normal sleep schedule. So you're going to bed like 10 o'clock, getting up at like 6 a.m. You can vary that a little bit, of course, but and doing that every night. So even on the weekends, if you have a normal 9 to 5 work schedule, even on the weekends, you want to stay as close to that as you possibly can. Okay. This is super important. Go back to my circadian rhythms video, part 1. And this can correct a lot of sleep disorder issues. Okay, sleepwalking is the next one that we're going to talk about here. Also fairly benign in most cases. This is also sometimes called somnambulism. Again, I apologize if I'm butchering the names on these. It can sometimes be hereditary. Sleepwalking usually occurs in the first cycle of sleep. So we're going to do another video that's coming up here in the next week or two, talking about the sleep stages and the sleep cycles. They're two different things. And in the first couple hours, or really the first 90 minutes, that's your first cycle of sleep, okay? And so sleepwalking typically occurs in those first couple hours. It's actually very, very common for teens and children. Some of the causes for sleepwalking are lack of sleep, again, an irregular sleep pattern, not having a consistent, sleep time that follows, the neurotypical circadian rhythms, fatigue, stress, certain medications, caffeine intake before bedtime, alcohol intake before bedtime, certain illnesses, fever, head injury, certain mental health issues can exacerbate this. It's also not uncommon for a person to be sleepwalking if they're sleeping in a different environment, such as, a child's first camping trip, or staying in a hotel or staying at a friend's house, things like that. That's actually usually the first time that these things are kind of discovered. There's also some less intense versions of what's considered somnambulism, such as sitting up in bed, or moving around a lot inside the bed. One of the ways parents can help their children to deal with this, there is a little bit of danger, especially if you've got like a 2-story house. In adults, it can be more dangerous because I do know of some stories of people actually getting in their car and driving. I know of a woman who set her backyard on fire, and when her husband went out to ask her what she was doing, she said she was barbecuing. She was actually sleepwalking. So they can be a little bit dangerous. In children, one of the ways that you can treat this is for the parents to try to figure out approximately what time this is happening. And you have to kind of journal it a little bit and wake them up maybe like 15 minutes, 10 minutes before it's about to happen. And you start to train the brain to do that transition between sleep cycles a little bit better. In terms of trying to get this under control, you want to, again go back to video number 2 now, where we talk about the sleep setting and the sleep environment. You want to have a cool, dark room. You want to, again, have consistent sleep times, right? This is so key with all these sleep disorders, is getting that circadian rhythm on track. That's in our video 1. For children, try to help them cut back on liquids before bedtime. For adults, try to cut back on the alcohol and caffeine before bedtime. Okay, moving on to the third disorder. This one is also very, very common, but we're starting to get into some of the more problematic sleep disorders in terms of effect on someone's mental health, and that is sleep paralysis. Now, sleep paralysis is when you wake up mentally and you're mentally alert but physically unable to move. And sometimes that's accompanied by feelings of being choked or difficult to breathe, or as if somebody's sitting on your chest. It is terrifying. It is a horrible experience. This is also, unfortunately, very, very common. At least 40% of the people will experience this at some point in your life. Let's talk about the causes and some ways to deal with it when it does happen, and some longer term solutions for this one. So again, we need to talk about this consistency of your sleep cycle, right? You can't be alternating. I go to bed at 2 a.m. one night, and then 11 o'clock the next night, and 8 o'clock the next night, and then back to 2 a.m. This is one of the most common causes of these problems. There is some, let me backtrack here for just a second with the sleep paralysis. There is some cultural beliefs in certain cultures about what's happening during the sleep paralysis. It is a terrifying experience, but from a scientific standpoint, what's happening is that you're not transitioning between the stages of sleep easily, okay? So again, I think we're gonna do this in the next video. We're gonna talk about the stages of sleep and the cycles of sleep. So when you watch that video, then you can reference back to this, but there's periods of time during your sleep cycle where or your stages of sleep, I'm sorry, where your body does naturally go into a state of sleep paralysis, but your mind is not supposed to be awake during that point. You're supposed to be in REM sleep, which is, if you've ever seen it on movies, that's when your eyes are closed and they're moving back and forth. Most likely you're in a dream state at that point. What's happening is that for the sleep paralysis is there's some mix up in the signals there. You are supposed to be asleep when that's happening. The sleep paralysis part, the part where you're not supposed to be able to move, is natural, okay? When this happens, if you find yourself experiencing this, the first thing you can do is try to calm your mind using some of those thought-stopping techniques that we've talked about in the panic videos, right? See how everything that we're doing here references back to the building blocks of previous videos, right? So I'll put a link into the description down below for the panic videos, right? So if you've not seen those yet and you're experiencing sleep paralysis, I do recommend you go and see those. So when you're laying there, try to, and you have that sheer terror moment of, oh gosh, I can't move. What do I do? I want you to tell yourself, I'm okay. This is sleep paralysis. My mind should be asleep right now. We just had some crossed signals in the stages of sleep. This is a natural thing. It occurs to a lot of people and it will pass within a few minutes. So I know it's hard because your mind is going to start sending off those panic alert signals, but thought stopping and kind of self-talk, that positive self-talk, is absolutely the best thing you can do to try to get this under control. You will, either your body will kind of break out of that sleep paralysis or you'll drift off to sleep in a few minutes. That's the natural state, is for it to, that will correct itself. Now, how do we prevent this from happening altogether? Yeah, so that's the next part here. So what are some of the causes of this? Well, surprise, surprise, an inconsistent sleep schedule is, again, one of the biggest causes of this, but it can also be stress, illness, certain medications, trauma, some mental health issues, certain substance abuse issues can contribute to this. So long-term, we got to correct some of those issues, right? And the easiest one, although this is also the one that I get the most resistance on, is correcting that consistent sleep schedule. Cut back on the caffeine before bedtime. All these things that we've talked about in the previous videos. That's why I did those first before we came to this section. There is also, seems to be more of a correlation with certain mental health issues for this one, with bipolar disorder and ADHD. Again, what is the link there in the brain? We're not entirely sure. But it's probably more common if you've got issues like that you may see some sleep paralysis issues, and all the more reason to develop these skills and the consistency of your sleep habits and your sleep environment. If you suffer from narcolepsy, there seems to be some links here with narcolepsy as well. That's not exactly known and understood. So we're going to put some links down below for you to research narcolepsy a little bit, and maybe at some point down the road we'll come back to that one. Okay, so if you try everything that we talked about in part 1 and part 2 of this series, and this is still occurring on a frequent basis, I do recommend you getting to speak to a therapist. There may be some mental health issues or stress issues that are making this happen on a consistent basis. If this happens to you once in a while, again, it's probably something you can correct with everything else that we just talked about here and in videos 1 and 2. All right? So the next one we're going to talk about, of course, is nightmares, and this is the last one we're going to cover for today. Nightmares is a very common thing for people to struggle with. Almost everyone at some point in your life is going to experience nightmares. It can be more common in children, and a lot of times they'll outgrow at least the frequency of it. So let's talk about the more mild cases, and then we'll finish up with the more severe cases. So in the more mild cases, a lot of times a person will wake up and their heart's beating real fast, they're breathing heavy, they're sweating, and they got that panic signal going off in the brain, but they may not even remember the content of the dream. That seems to be fairly common. The more severe cases, they'll have very, very vivid imagery that they can remember. So for those with infrequent nightmares, what are the solutions? Well, you're going to be shocked that I tell you that consistent sleep schedule, again, and cutting back on caffeine at nighttime, again, these are so critical. So there is a little bit of evidence too about like eating close to bed, like having that night snack. For some people, that link is not entirely clear as well, but there are certain foods that do kind of stimulate the brain. Be aware of that, and maybe cut out that late night snack. If you are quitting smoking, be aware that it's also very common for people with the nicotine patch, if they fall asleep with that on, to have nightmares. It has to do with the way that the nicotine stimulates the brain. That being said, probably not a good idea to be smoking so close to bedtime too. I know smoking is hard to quit. I get that. We'll probably do a series on that down the road too. But maybe think about at least not having that cigarette right before you fall asleep. Okay, certain medications can contribute to nightmares. If you are getting them frequently, or if your child's getting them frequently, just kind of talk to your doctor or your nurse practitioner and see if that's one of the possible side effects. Withdrawing from substances can be also cause of nightmares, and in that case, as your body starts to detox, they should become less frequent. But talk to your doctor, talk to your therapist about that. You may be withdrawing from a substance and not even know it. So if you've been on a certain medication for a while and then your doctor's taking you off of it, there could be some detox going on from that. Maybe you're drinking two glasses of wine a night, and then you suddenly go on a diet or something like that, and you've cut out that completely. You're going through a little detox there. It may not be severe if it's only 2 glasses a night, but there is a little bit of a detox that goes on with that. There is some scientific links with other issues such as restless leg syndrome and sleep apnea. Again, I'll put those links down below because I'm not going to cover those right now. More frequent nightmares can absolutely contribute to depression and anxiety and panic attacks. So if you're doing everything you can and it's not improving, that may be something where it's time to, make a call and say, I need to come in and see the therapist. If you've got any kind of severe trauma, nightmares is a very, very common symptom that goes along with that. And if that's happening frequently and it's giving you a lot of distress and maybe even causing insomnia, so that, we know from all the stuff that we've talked about in the previous videos of this, that insomnia can exacerbate health issues, can exacerbate mental health issues. So, this is something that has kind of a snowball effect. If it's happening frequently and they're very intense and it's causing you to lose sleep, to be depressed, to have anxiety, to have panic, and you've done all this other stuff that we've talked about in videos 1, 2, 3, 4, then let's go ahead and call that therapist and set up that appointment. Let's see if we can get some stuff done. So what's going to be done in therapy if you go to address this? Well, it depends on the background and the training of the therapist. I myself do a lot of trauma-focused CBT and cognitive processing therapy for trauma, but I'm also working on incorporating something that's called Imagery Rehearsal. And the way that this works is you talk to the therapist about your nightmare and especially if it's a recurring nightmare, and how does that usually end, and how would you like to have control over that? And so you talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And what you're doing is you're actually building this cognitive engram in your mind that when you go into sleep, hopefully we start to trigger that so you have control over the dream and you can give it a different ending, okay? EMDR, I am not a trained EMDR therapist at the time of filming this video, but EMDR for trauma work is amazing. I've got a video with interviewing my friend Jenny that actually talks about her experiences as an EMDR therapist and what it is. I'm going to link that one down below. So we are going to have a very long description section here, but again, if you're thinking about doing something like that, please check out that video. EMDR, I've seen it work on people, and it is amazing, and it is something that I intend to add to my repertoire at some point down the road in my career. There are certain medications that can be helpful with nightmares as well. I'm not going to name those here. I'm not a prescriber, so yes, I know what those medications are. No, I'm not going to give you that kind of medical advice here, but I will tell you that there are medications that can help, and you can talk to your doctor and ask them for what their thoughts on that are. Last thought on nightmares is that watch your caffeine intake, watch your alcohol intake before bed. Again, those tend to be factors that can contribute to this. A little journaling before bed might be able to help too, kind of clearing the mind, all the things that we talk about, especially in video 2, okay? Thank you so much for watching today. I know I did not cover every single sleep disorder. I hit on 4 of the more common. Again, maybe we can get a collaborator in here to help with a couple of these issues, or down the road, maybe I can revisit some of those issues. Please remember to smash that like button. This video takes quite a long time to produce and edit, and I have to do a lot of research, especially for a topic like this, to make sure I'm not bringing you incorrect information. So I don't get paid for this, but it does take a lot of time. When you smash that like button, that's like giving me a little bit of a tip in the tip jar, boosts my self-esteem, tells me that you like these videos, and makes me want to produce more of them. But more importantly than that, it actually lets other people out there start to see this when they search for sleep disorders or they search for nightmares, because it boosts me up in the algorithm on YouTube and says, hey, this guy's got some good knowledge. Let's get this out to the people that are searching for it. Okay. Also remember to subscribe. We have more videos coming on mental health. Coming up next in the series, we're going to talk about those stages of sleep, and we're going to talk about those cycles of sleep. And that's going to be a very technical kind of video. So you'll be able to, if some of the stuff that we talked about in this video will make even more sense when we do that one. I really appreciate you all. We will see you next time on A Little Bit of Everything with Sarge.